Hi everyone. So this is not going to be one of my normal videos. I'm going to talk about what happened at the Capitol this week. So if this is a bit dated, please stick around because whatever time you're in the future, I'm sure it probably is still a problem. What I really want to talk about today is the internet a problem in our society, or is it a good thing, or is it somewhere in between? For those who don't know that are watching this recently, there was a breach of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., which, for me is rather close to where I live in more than one way. So what happened was there were a group of people that basically decided to do this, and I think everyone can agree that they were misguided. That's where I'd start with this. So the question is, what is going on here? Things have been getting crazier and crazier in society, and we need to find something or someone to blame. I understand that. So there's been a lot of suggestions. One has been, well, it's the media, it's the way the media is, and if it were the way it used to be, everything would be just fine. Another one is this is a product of the internet and social media, and that's what I'd like to talk about. So I was having a conversation with someone on this, and I made the argument that, being in defense of the internet, that the internet is just a tool, and that would be like blaming hammers for hurting people's fingers, that we should know how to use that tool and it's not the internet's fault. And even though, on its face that argument is valid, I would also say it's not 100%, it doesn't really cover it. Because later I thought about, well, dynamite's a tool. We don't have that on sale at Walmart for $400 a piece. Heck, I think you can get computers for even less than that now. So there is this tool that is, it's very complex. It really is, and most people don't understand it. Yet we make it not only readily available, we've made it almost mandatory in our society. And I mean, I'm a child of the internet, as I like to describe myself. I was working on websites when I was 12. I love the idea that I could just put my voice out there to the world, but I kind of grew up with it in a way, although I grew up with it at a time that not everyone else was, growing up with it at the same time. It really depended on if you wanted to be in or not. Today, it's kind of a requirement. You can't do a lot of things without the internet. I mean, bank accounts almost require you to have an internet connection these days of some kind, even if it's your cell phone. To get a job, you are actually, if you don't have a social media account known as LinkedIn, it's harder to get a job, and there are a lot of companies that won't even consider you if you don't have a LinkedIn account, especially in certain professions. So this is a little bit different than a lot of other tools, and the argument is this, that people are on the internet now and on social media now, and what they've done is they've put themselves into these kind of bubbles where they don't really know what's true, and neither does anyone else on the internet, which is something I will explain, and they just say the same things to each other and get each other to believe kind of outrageous things. And the end result is that they believe it to the extent that they would have believed a reputable source from back in the day, which is a problem. I mean, when you see interviews with people that did storm the Capitol, they do seem to hold beliefs that, it's not about the belief they hold, it's really about the certainty of which they hold that belief. that is probably the part that's troubling. And I should discern that the internet and social media are not quite the same. Social media makes it a bit easier for this to happen in two ways. One is that, when I was a kid in the 90s, I could, make a website and I could say what I wanted to, but I would have to work at it if I wanted it to actually look good and reputable. And honestly, nothing on the internet looked that good or reputable. But basically, I could still do it. Today it's a little bit different. With very little effort, you can make something that looks incredibly reputable, and that's because of social media, that they give you the easy tools to make a Twitter account or a Facebook account and have a nice UI around it, and it can look quite reputable. I wouldn't deny that. And because that is the most accessible part of the internet today, a lot of people, that is where they live on the internet, especially people that are, not as good at navigating it. So the internet to them basically is social media, which, that's maybe not good in itself. But if you look at social media, it actually is in itself only still a tool that those people that are there signed up, made accounts, which is just records in a database, and then they made groups that are just more records in a database with, relationships, basically, that these people are now in this group. So it's open-ended. It's just a tool, and what we were to do with that tool of social media was completely up to us, but it is what we did. And that in itself could be considered troubling. So I guess one of the points I am trying to make is that when you look at these things, you have to ask yourself, what can be done to mitigate this? And what a lot of companies have done, like Twitter and Facebook, is they have gone to what a lot of people refer to as censorship. Other people see it a little bit more as damage control. But that, as someone who grew up with the internet and loves the internet for what it was when it was young, and I still love it today, is not the way I would want to see things go. I don't think that's good. I don't like the idea that there's an arbiter or there is, someone controlling all of this, because that's not what the internet's about. The internet was about anyway, and I think to a degree it really still is that you can say what you want to, and people can listen or they can not listen, and you can have your own voice and your own self-expression, and it's free for you to do that, no matter how good or bad that may be. But that is coming from someone that loved it for what it used to be, when it wasn't as structured as it is today. Another thing I will say is I'm a bit of a younger person. I'm 31 right now. So I do get that for someone who grew up reading the newspaper or watching Dan Rather on television for 30 minutes a night, there is something that they were doing to judge how reputable a source is. And that thing was probably based a lot on production quality. And, back in the day, the early 90s, the early 2000s, the internet, you could put your voice out there, but the production quality wouldn't be that high. Today, it's easy. You just sign up for a social media account and you type stuff. And I think I do understand why the social media companies that have provided this tool to these people, when they're misusing it, feel a responsibility to do these types of things. So I'm not here to take a stance on whether or not Facebook and Twitter should actually be censoring people or damage control, whatever way you want to look at it. Back in the day, it was different, and today it's easy to make yourself look reputable on the internet without a whole lot of effort, and I do understand that. But is it not people's responsibility to, figure that out? Well, I think so, but I also get that, you could start selling dynamite at Walmart and say, well, isn't it people's responsibility to make sure they don't blow up the wrong things? I don't think that would work out that well. At the same time, I don't think any of this is going away. I don't think the way the media is, I don't think that's going to change. The way that the internet is, I don't think that's really going to change for a number of reasons. With the internet, I can name a few. One, it makes money. It has become the single biggest advertising venue that we've ever seen. And there are some of the largest companies in the United States are companies that run basically websites. I mean, we call them websites, and there's a lot more to it than that, but that is what's happening. So I guess what I'm saying is you can say what you will, if this is a good thing or a bad thing. The fact of the matter is, I don't think it's going to change. And the same goes with the media. I think that the way things have progressed, I think that's going to stay the way they progress. We're going to continue going in this direction. And that leaves us with a different situation. If my hypothesis is true, I don't think we're going to be able to get rid of the internet. I don't think anyone would argue that. I don't even think we're going to be able to fundamentally change social media. I think this is one of those things that you can't just give it to people and then take it away. I don't think that's going to work out. And I don't think we want that. I think one thing about the internet is we tend to talk a lot about the bad things it does, and we don't talk about the good things it does. The interconnectivity, the ability that if I want to learn something that I don't know, it's just a click away, and I can see a video of how to do something I've never done before, and there's a high probability I'll be able to accomplish my task. I mean, there's so many beautiful things about the internet today that we just don't talk about, but they are real. And if you tried to take it away in some way, or even social media, allowing people to stay connected when they no longer live in the same state and they no longer live the same lives, but they can meet with each other, someone from high school, and they can catch up. And maybe one day that will keep them together enough to become friends when they're old. There are so many good things about the way the internet is today. And I don't think we're taking that away. I don't think that's ever going to go away, and I don't want it to. I really don't want it to. But at the same time, the question then becomes, what can we do to help with this? I mean, so I've thought of a few things, and they sound dumb, a lot of them, and they sound basic. We can educate people, right? It's harder to educate older people, but it can be done that, part of the problem is that there are a lot of users of the internet that don't actually contribute to it. And I don't mean contribute as though, that's such a good, valorous thing for people that contribute to do. Because these days, contribution can be really easy. It used to be harder, but, today, you just sign up for an account and you start writing stuff. And there are people that do that too. There are a lot of people that they just go and they read, and from one side or another, they may not understand how easy it really is to put things on the internet. And, coming from the 90s and the early 2000s, I know how easy it is to put things on the internet. And how, if I can do it that easily, well, the evil version of me could probably have an easier time doing it. So I do think we need some kind of education that, and I'm not saying make this a prerequisite to buying a computer. I'm just saying we need something out there, some kind of public program. And I think we already are teaching this in schools, that we need to have an education on how the internet works and why it's not the same as what you might see on TV, even though I know that's not even today considered much better. Why we need to look into what we look at. That someone like me can see something on Twitter or Reddit and know to not just trust it blindly, to actually try to follow it and be willing to accept that that thing might not be true, and be willing to walk away saying, I heard this, but I don't know if it's true, and maybe kind of just forget about it altogether. I think there's something about certainty, that a lot of us like to have certainty, and when we read something, it makes us feel that we are now certain about it. And with the internet, that's just not the case. Now, that's not to say that you can't verify things on the internet, but I don't think most people have the skills to do so, and I fear that they don't have the motivation to either. But the second one is a difficult one to fix, that trying to motivate someone to be fact-oriented is hard, but trying to teach them to is a lot easier. And we live in a world today where people can just say the word. I heard from, when I was in high school, you had to cite your sources. And it seems like the bar is a lot lower today, and we need to kind of bring it back up. And I don't see that as conflicting with the internet or the idea of the internet at all. I'm not saying that people can't say whatever they want to say on the internet, but people that are consumers of content on the internet, we need to arm them with the skills to do that kind of thing. And I think that can be done. I think they can be sort of motivated to do that in a way, that nobody likes being wrong. And although the way a lot of people deal with it today is just by, arguing or blocking out things they don't agree with and going back to their source, if we could give them tools, simple tools, to fact check what they read, which, is not necessarily difficult. It's like you're given something someone says. Somebody says this thing happened out in the world. You can take that as fact, or you can do a Google search for that exact thing they said with the word news after it, and you can find a more reputable organization, whether that be a news organization or a university or the Associated Press, which will still not tell you 100% if it's true. Honestly, in life, there's very few things that we can be 100% certain of, but it would help, and you would be able to walk away knowing that if you were wrong or you said the wrong thing, that it can't really be blamed on you. You did have a source that you went off of, and as for setting the bar for those sources, I think that's maybe a discussion for another time, and maybe a personal decision. The problem I have is right now we're not doing it. We're not setting that bar at all, and we're not educating people on this at all. And I do fear that leads to kind of what we saw this week. So, is the internet part of the problem? Is it what's causing these things in society to happen? I don't think it's just the internet, but I do think having people using a tool that are not educated to use it, I do think it's probably leading to some kind of dysfunction. I'm not trying to say that we need to restrict the internet in any way. I don't think we're at that point, and I hope we will never be at that point. But at the same time, I think there are some common sense things that we can do that it might be a bit the fault of, the tech community, people like me that, we tend to be younger and we tend to run at this stuff head first, and we've been having a great time. And we may not have considered the implications for people that are less experienced with this type of thing. I mean, if you really think about it, the internet is really something that people that did not grow up with there's nothing like it. And what we generally do is when we find something new, especially as you get older, you tend to try to relate it to something you do know. And the internet can most easily be associated with media itself, which used to be a lot more structured. And the internet is very unstructured. So I think it's fair to say that we should put more effort into teaching this. I think we should have a class in schools that teaches children to associate, information they find on the internet with proper sources that they can also find on the internet. I think that they need guidance on this, although less so than older people that were not growing up with the internet. And if you're older watching this video, I mean no offense at all. It's just a new thing, but it's a thing that can apparently and definitely in some cases lead to some pretty bad outcomes. So I'm not saying to force anything on anyone, but I do think we need to look at this a little bit more closely. I would never be for shutting anything down, or I'm not even for censorship, but what I am for is for having some kind of structure where we attempt, like a PSA, we attempt to educate people on the things they see on the internet. I mean, I still have kind of like cable television, I stream it, but I see commercials and I see PSAs, and I've yet to see one that just a little 2-minute or whatever, a 30-second overview of, hey, don't believe everything you read on the internet. I've never seen anything like that, and I think it would be worth it. So that's my thoughts on this. If you agree with me, feel free to like this video. I'd be happy to hear it. If you disagree with me, feel free to give me a dislike. But if you do, please tell me why you disagree with me. I won't like getting the dislike, but it'll probably be worth it to me to maybe hear your point. Maybe I've missed something. And if you like this kind of stuff, feel free to subscribe to this channel. This isn't my normal stuff, but felt like it was necessary. Have a good night.